March Madness is almost here, so it's time to talk about which basketball teams are hot right now and which basketball teams are cold. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. What I do, videos every single day, sometimes college football and sometimes college basketball. The best way to support this channel and get more of my content, hit the subscribe button. Yesterday, pretty much every ranked team won. They held serve, except for one, and that was number 6, Texas. They got upset on the road at Oklahoma State, 75-67, and that's their third straight loss, including losing 4 of their last 5. So that got me to thinking, what teams are hot right now and what teams are cold right now going into March Madness. It's right around the corner. So let's talk about the cold teams right now. The first team, well, I just talked about them, Texas. They were all the way up to number 4 in the nation, and then they lost 3 games in a row, including 4 of their last 5. They were 10-1 and now they're 11-5. They will most certainly fall out of the top 10 this week. The only win during that stretch was against Kansas State, who is the worst team in the Big 12. Not a horrific remaining schedule. They have at Kansas State versus TCU, at Oklahoma, at Iowa State versus West Virginia versus Kansas, and then at Texas Tech. So yes, there are some difficult games in there, but a few easy ones as well. Next cold team, staying in the Big 12, Kansas. Kansas will not be ranked for the first time in over a decade. Why? Because they lost to West Virginia. Kansas has lost 5 out of their last 7 games. That's not good. Lost at Oklahoma State, at Baylor, at Oklahoma. They got a win against TCU, lost at Tennessee, win against Kansas State, and then a loss at West Virginia. Remaining games, Oklahoma State, at Kansas State, Texas Tech, at Texas, and Baylor. Kansas has some work to do before March Madness. I still think they're firmly in the tournament, but you never know. Some crazy things can happen and they can miss the whole daggum thing. I don't think that's going to happen though. Next cold team, number 10, Alabama. They've lost 2 out of their last 3, so not as bad, just kind of a mini cold streak. Lost at Oklahoma, got a win against LSU, and then lost at Missouri. The remaining games at South Carolina, Georgia, at Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, at Arkansas, at Mississippi State, and versus Auburn. So not a tough stretch. They can make that up and have a really good seed in the tournament. But they did fall at least 1 line this past week. Next, slightly cold team, Wisconsin, number 19. They've lost 3 out of their last 5. Lost against Ohio State, win at Maryland, lost at Penn State, win against Penn State, lost at Illinois. Remaining schedule, at Nebraska, Michigan, Iowa, at Northwestern, Illinois, at Purdue, at Iowa. Tough stretch. Speaking of the Big Ten, next cold team, Iowa. They've lost 3 of their last 4. They lost against Indiana, at Illinois, got a win against Michigan State, and then they lost to Ohio State. Remaining schedule, at Indiana, Rutgers, at Michigan State, at Wisconsin, Penn State, at Ohio State, at Michigan, and versus Wisconsin. So Iowa also has a tough stretch before March Madness gets here. Next, let's talk about the hot teams, and then we'll talk about the red hot teams. First hot team, my team, West Virginia. Number 17 in the nation. We've won 4 out of our last 5, except for that unexplainable loss to Florida. Remaining schedule for West Virginia, at Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Baylor, at Texas, at TCU, and against Kansas State. So a few easy games in there, but these next 3 or 4 games are going to be tough for West Virginia. Next team that's hot, number 5, Houston. They're 16-2. Their only 2 losses on the year, at Tulsa, at East Carolina. The only issue with Houston is they've had a pretty easy schedule. The remaining schedule, at South Florida, Memphis, East Carolina, at Cincinnati, at Wichita State, South Florida, at Memphis. So I expect Houston to go into March Madness with a very good record, but how good really is Houston? We'll find out whenever the big dance comes around. Number 9, Oklahoma. They're a hot team. They're 12-5. They've won 6 out of the last 7. Their only loss was to Iowa State, one of the bottom feeders of the Big 12. Their only loss. Yeah, go figure. Remaining schedule, Baylor. That's a tough one. At West Virginia, Texas, at Iowa State, at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. So that's one of the toughest stretches remaining. Next hot team, number 11, Tennessee. They're 13-4. They've won 3 out of their last 4. Their only loss at Ole Miss, which doesn't make sense. Remaining schedule: Florida at LSU, South Carolina, Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, at Auburn, and Georgia. I think Tennessee will have a very nice record going into March Madness, probably a top 3 seed. The last of the hot teams, number 13, Texas Tech. They've won 3 straight, including at LSU, Oklahoma, and at Kansas State. Remaining schedule: West Virginia, at Baylor, at TCU, at Kansas, at Oklahoma State, and Texas. So, tough stretch, but it's manageable. Texas Tech is getting hot at the right time. How good will they be when March Madness rolls around? Now let's move on to the red hot teams. The first one is number 12, Illinois. They started off the season rough. They're 13-5, but as of recent games, 4 straight wins, including Penn State, Iowa, at Indiana, and Wisconsin. Remaining games: at Michigan, Northwestern, at Minnesota, Nebraska, at Wisconsin, and at Ohio State. Keep an eye on Illinois. They are a good team. Next team that's red hot right now, number 7, Ohio State, 15-4. They've won 4 straight, including at Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan State, at Iowa. That's a good streak. Remaining games: at Maryland, Indiana, at Penn State, Michigan, at Michigan State, Iowa, and at Illinois. So yeah, they've got some tough games in there, but they're getting hot at the right time. Next hot team, staying in the Big Ten, number 4, Michigan. Their only loss the whole season was to Minnesota. Michigan has had to postpone games because of COVID issues. We'll see if that messes with their hot streak. Remaining games: Indiana, at Northwestern, Illinois, at Wisconsin, Rutgers, at Ohio State, at Indiana, Iowa, and at Michigan State. Yeah, I see some really tough games in there. The last 3 red hot teams are all undefeated. The first one I'm going to mention, I've been talking about for a while, and they just recently got ranked. Number 25, Drake. They're 18-0. They do have a game today, so we'll see how they do against Valpo. Then they have Northern Illinois, 2 straight games against Loyola Chicago, 1 at home, 1 on the road. At Northern Illinois, 2 games against Evanston at home, and then at Boston University, and then at Boston University. Yes, COVID is making schedules look really, really weird. The last 2 red hot teams you can probably already guess. Number 1, Gonzaga, 17-0. Number 2, Baylor, 16-0. For Gonzaga, not really any tough games left, except for a road trip to BYU. They have Santa Clara, at BYU, at Santa Clara, at San Francisco, St. Mary's, and then San Diego. For Baylor, they have TCU, at Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Iowa State, and at Kansas. Not a tough stretch. Maybe that Texas game at Oklahoma, that might be a tough road test. We'll see how that goes. But all 3 of those teams are undefeated. We'll see how good Drake really is. And Baylor, I've bought into Baylor. They've beaten some really, really good teams. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.